We're going to change oil on this Nissan today. Before we get started, we need to make sure we have all of our supplies and all the tools that we need so we can get this job done as quickly and as efficiently as possible. A couple of things we might need, starting from the left there, we've got our Valvoline oil, we've got an STP filter, it was on sale, so I picked that up, it's high mileage. We've got some blue rags, keep our hands clean, keep our parts clean, some tools for the filter and for the drain plug, our hydraulic floor jack and jack stands for safely lifting and supporting, and of course we need something to hold the used oil in, so drain bucket and a funnel to put the new oil in. So hey, let's get started. So I usually take the cap off for a couple of different reasons, and I usually pull the dipstick out. I don't pull it all the way out, I just pull it out of the tube. I pull that out so when we start letting the oil out from the bottom, that we have air that is able to take place of that volume, and it just makes the oil change a little bit quicker. And what it also does is it reminds me that I have not put oil in it yet, just in case I get pulled away from the job for some reason. I can come back to it and go think to myself, where did I leave off? Well, if I see this cap out, I know I haven't put oil back in it, so I'll go underneath and look and make sure everything's done underneath there. Park brake on. Can't forget to chock the wheels with something. Some of these trucks you can probably slide underneath there and do the oil change just fine, but I'm going to lift this one up just so I can see underneath there. There might be a skid plate that blocks the oil pan drain or the oil filter, and I just want to be able to slide underneath there and get to it. So I'm going to lift this vehicle up using floor jack and safety stands, and we'll get back to it as soon as I'm done. We're going to slide underneath the vehicle now and see if we can't find the drain plug and the filter. So here I found the drain plug, the oil drain plug right there. That's the oil pan, the bottom of the engine. If you look back here, this other piece right back here, that's a drain pan too, or not a drain pan, but it's an oil pan, but it's for the transmission, and it does have a plug on it. So you really need to be careful on making sure you pick the right plug, okay? So seeing this is a rear-wheel drive truck, the engine's gonna be always in the front, so therefore I'm gonna choose the drain plug that is closest to the front. Now let's look for the filter. I found the filter actually underneath the skid plate, so I'm gonna have to pull the skid plate out. So it's a good thing I raised it up. There it is. Most vehicles today are going to be using metric sized wrenches and fasteners and stuff. So I grabbed 3 of them that I think were, it should be one of these 3. So I usually grab the one that I think it is, and then I grab one larger, and then I grab one smaller than it. So I'm going to pick the one that's going to fit the tightest on there. That one's too loose. This one's way too loose, and hopefully my third one fits. Okay, so it's a 14 millimeter, and that's the wrench that I'm going to use to remove and install the drain plug. Probably one of the most important things besides wrench choosing is figuring out which direction that the drain plug goes in to remove it. So what I always recommend is, if you're not sure, if you don't do this every day, if you don't have that that experience of changing oil and mechanical things, this is the drain plug that I want to pull out, and it has to go to the left or counterclockwise. So my recommendation to you is, if you're not sure which way it is because of the way you're looking at it, I want you to put your hands on it like you're opening up a bottle of water. And because rarely do I see anybody have a problem opening up a bottle of water to take a drink. You all have that muscle memory to turn it the correct direction to pull it off and to put the cap back on. So that's what I want you to do. I want you to put your fingers on there, and if this were a bottle cap, I would move it this way in order to remove it. So counterclockwise, we're making that drain plug move this way in order to pull it out. So the next challenge is breaking this thing loose. So you're not going to lay it on the ground like this. You're not going to have a lot of leverage to just pull. And sometimes that's not very safe because the wrench could slip off. You could hit your hand, you could hit your arm, you could scrape yourself up, you can cut yourself, whatever. So a lot of times we need to work a little bit smarter. So one way that I show students how to do this, or move this out of the way, is if you can, get in there and smack it with this part of your palm or in here. And that usually doesn't hurt so much, and when you smack on it, it kind of breaks it loose. But a smarter way I like to do this is I like to increase my leverage by increasing the length of my wrench. And how do I do that? I take another wrench and I put it on there and I link these two together so that I actually double the length of my wrench, which means I have to take half the force in order to break it loose like that. And now the bolt is loose, the drain plug is loose, okay? So I'm gonna bring my pan over. Now this oil is gonna cascade out, so I need to be able ready to catch it. And once I break it loose, I should be able to use my fingers to drain it. And here's my next trick. For my next trick, I'm going to try and remove the drain plug without it getting a whole bunch of oil on me. So I'm going to keep turning it until those threads are really loose, until I feel I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to push the bolt into the pan as I'm turning it, and what that does is it allows me to pull the bolt out very quickly and start draining the engine oil. So there's our filter. It's actually at the front of the engine. I had to take that skid plate down and to gain access to it so we can replace it. Okay, we're gonna get the filter off now while the oil is draining. And here's our oil filter. There's a couple different methods that we can use for the oil filter. We have these crazy oil filter wrenches that only tighten in one direction and they won't in the other. This is for a large size of filter. This is kind of a smaller filter, so I'm not going to be able to use this one because the little hole doesn't get tight enough, the strap doesn't get tight enough around the filter. Otherwise you would tighten around the filter, move it counterclockwise, and loosen it up and spin it off. So remember, again, this is like a drain plug. Which way is it going to go? It's going to come off counterclockwise like this. Heck, if you can get it off with your hand, that's great, but a lot of times you can't, and you need to use a special tool for it. I have such a tool with me, and this goes onto the filter, and as you can see, it's kind of spring loaded. And when I turn it counterclockwise, what happens is these edges kind of bite into the filter and they loosen it up. So all I really need to do with the tool is loosen the filter. So I'm going to put it on there. I'm going to go counterclockwise. I'm going to loosen it up. And now the filter's loose, as you can see. And then I always want to, because there's oil in the filter, I always want to have a drain bucket underneath there like such. Sometimes I have to share it with the drain plug. Okay, and now I'm able to spin that filter off. Super important step. You're going to grab your filter, and before throwing it and discarding it and putting the new one on, you want to make sure that this black seal, you're going to make sure that you find it. Okay? I don't care if If it's still on the filter, that's great. You can see it, it's right here. But if you don't see the seal on there, that means it could still be on the engine. And if that seal is still on the engine, your new filter comes with the seal. And if you install the new filter and those two seals touch, that one, the old one, is going to slip and the filter will not tighten to the block. So if that's the case and you start up your engine with brand new oil in it, the oil pan is full of oil, the pump will pick up the oil, the pump will pressurize the oil, send it to the oil filter, and if the filter isn't sealed to the engine block, you're going to have oil spraying on the floor, you're going to have it on the engine block, you're going to have it all over, and before you know it, you're going to pump all the new oil out of your engine and possibly damage it. So make sure you find that seal. That's like super important. All right, we've got our new filter. We've got some oil still draining down. I'm gonna clean this up a little bit, the sealing surface, make sure there isn't any dirt. And then while this is still draining a little bit, I'm gonna take some of this used oil and I'm gonna put it on the filter's new O-ring seal. We never install a seal dry. And notice that I'm not using a tool. It's a spin-on filter. And I'm gonna tighten it as tight as I can with the one hand. There's also instructions on a filter sometimes where it says when it makes first contact, you just tighten it another 3/4 of a turn. I generally don't do that. I just tighten it as tight as I can with my hand. And if it's too slippery, sometimes I'll put a rag on it too. Make sure it's tight. And then once I got it on there, of course, I'm always going to try and clean the area up, leave it a little bit cleaner than when I saw it. So if there's any leaks after my change, I know it's not because oil was sitting on the frame somewhere. I know it might be a fresh leak if it's actually leaking. So that looks ready to go. Now it's time to go put in the drain plug. So it's a good idea to check the drain plug gasket. The threads on the drain plug look pretty good, but this little piece of plastic right here, that is actually the gasket. It seals the plug to the oil pan. You want to make sure it's not cracked. If it's cracked or brittle or broke, you might want to replace that because that is a potential for oil pan leaks. But this one seems like it's in good shape. We're going to reuse it as is. Our oil is just dripping out. It's not running out of the drain hole anymore. It's just dripping. So I know I've got as much oil as I can out of there. So I'm going to take my drain plug, start it with my hand, tighten it up with my hand, and then grab my 14mm wrench with one hand, and I am not going to over tighten it because I'm only going to use my one hand to use this, to tighten this. Give it a little grunt, and that is tightened up. And then I'm going to clean my area up, make sure I don't have any residual oil left on the frame or around the plug or around any suspension components. And now I'm done from underneath. Can't forget to put the skid plate back on. It's time to take it off the jack stands. Looking at our vehicle emission control label, we see that the vehicle conforms to US EPA regulations, blah, blah, blah. Fueled 2007 model year, so this is a 2007. And generally the emission decal also has the engine size in here. And it's pretty tough to see, but this one's kind of hidden. And it's actually a 5.6 liter engine. Now, we found that the engine size was a 5.6 liter. And it also says right here it's a V8. That's a couple of good pieces of information. It's a 2007. So the question is how much oil goes into this rig. A couple of different ways we can look at this. If we have access to an owner's manual, we can find the capacity in our owner's manual. If we don't have an owner's manual, there's links to digital copies of owner's manuals, or you could go in Google or use a search engine, internet search engine, in order to find the capacity of your engine with filter change. If we don't have access to any of that, I always recommend starting a V8, an 8-cylinder engine. I always put at least 5 quarts of oil in there, and then start using your dipstick and check it, okay? And then it's a little bit slower process, but we're putting in a little bit of oil incrementally until we get it up to the fill line, or the full line, and we don't overfill it. So if we overfill the engine oil crankcase, then we have to get underneath there and drain some oil out, so we're not going to do that. We also have to figure out what weight of oil. Here's this 530, what weight of oil goes in the vehicle, and that too is an owner's manual thing, it's an ALLDATA thing, or Mitchell, or digital owner's manual, or even your auto parts store will be able to tell us what weight of oil that we need. Okay, 6.5 quarts. This is 5 of them, so I'm going to put one of these in. Remember earlier I pulled the dipstick up out of the tube, so air can now be displaced as my oil goes in. I'm also going to use the second one. There's a scale over here on the back by the handle, and it kind of has all the graduations of how many quarts are in there, so I'll be able to use that to add my other 2.5 quarts. So 2.5 would be 1, 2, 2.5, right about here. And it looks like I got 2.5 quarts in. I'm going to lift the funnel out, but I'm going to put a rag underneath it so I don't drip it all over the engine. And then I'm going to put the cap on, and then I'm going to check the oil. There it is. So right now I'm up to the full line. Right here. I'm up to that full dot. And I'm going to put it back in. So I know I'm full right now. But my filter is still empty. I put a dry filter on and the filter is still empty. So I still need to fill the filter up first. So before closing the hood on this and being done, I need to make sure that the filter is full. Plus, go back and read it one more time and check to make sure that it's full. Okay, now we're inside the vehicle, and we need to find the oil pressure gauge or the oil pressure indicator, and we do that by turning on the ignition to the on position or the run position. Don't start it yet. And as you can see, oil light is right there. So that's on whenever there is no oil pressure, which there won't be because the engine's not running. And right next to it is the oil pressure gauge. So we just want to fill the filter up and then shut the car off and then get an accurate oil check. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And off. Perfect. All right, we just started it up. We filled the filter. The level in the oil pan is going to drop because that oil stays in the filter. We'll check it. Made sure that the vehicle was level. Get a good accurate check. And now you could see that we're right about, the streak is right about here. So we're halfway between the two dots. Let's see what these dots mean. So if we look at those dots, well, one of them is called H and the other one's an upside down L. That must be low. So if our oil level was right here, we're okay, but I think I'd like to add a little bit more to get it up to that full mark. So I think that's what I'll do. right about at the dot. I'm gonna call it good. Dipstick goes back all the way in. Cap goes on. So last part of an oil change is usually filling out a next service due sticker or reminder for the driver. And usually kind of depends on what kind of oil you put in it. Conventional oils, high mileage oils like I put in, we're looking at a 3-month, 3,000 mile interval. So I would want to replace my engine oil 3 months or 3,000 miles from today. We look at, hey, we've got 164,600 miles on this rig right now, which means that my next service due for this one would be 167,600 miles and 3 months from today. So generally we see that in a sticker up here, and we would fill out a next service due sticker, which you can get those at auto parts stores. And if you get your oil changed at Jiffy Lube or some facility like that, they'll put in a new sticker. So that's the process, and that was the last part of it. Happy driving.